Joining us now, House Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy. Not everybody, I don't know, depends on where you're sitting, I guess, Congressman. The Wall Street Journal says Republicans shouldn't be negotiating with themselves. They ought to be talking to Speaker Boehner. Is it helpful?
Is it helpful what the others are saying? Look, is raising the rates going to solve the problem? The answer is no. And the best way to look is we're 2 months into this new fiscal year. And if you've looked at the numbers that have come back, we're already $292 billion in a deficit for the year. Now, there are some good news inside those numbers. Do you realize that revenues have increased by 10%? That's $30 billion. That's $1 billion less than you get if you raise the rates in the first year. You'll only get $31 billion. But you know what the sad news is? Spending has increased by 16%, $87-some billion. The problem is spending when you look at this. And for those who want to just give the president more money to continue the spending, I think that's wrong. That's not rising above. We've got to solve this overall problem. That's why right after the election, we proposed a plan to the president. He took 3 weeks to respond back to us. I mean, I've been frustrated with this administration. Every action I've seen from them, they just want to slow walk us off the cliff because they think it'll blame the Republicans. We've been willing to negotiate, and we've been putting our plans out, but I agree, you cannot negotiate with yourself because nothing comes to the end of it.
Do you, have you spoken to Speaker Boehner since he had his meeting with the president yesterday?
I'm going to talk to him a little later today. I knew he was having the meeting. I know there wasn't staff in the room, so we'll see how that meeting went. But that's the first.
You have no idea? You haven't heard anything from anyone about what was discussed or what the tone was?
I've heard some things, but I'll wait till I talk to him one-on-one. Oh, yeah, can I tell you? Sure. I wasn't in the room.
We've just had a lot of people proposing, and I'm just wondering, I asked Erskine Bowles whether he thought the House would go along with it. Let's give the president all of the tax increases he wants, and then we'll be in a position to talk about cutting spending later. Is there any way that the Tea Party House guys are going to go for that? And what does that mean if they don't go for it? How are we ever going to get a deal?
Isn't that what we got, how we got in this mess in the first place? We're always going to talk about the tough stuff, the spending cuts later. Well, we spend too much now. That is our challenge. I mean, when you really look at the numbers and people argue, why don't you go back to the Clinton time, these were certain numbers that Clinton had. The real core of what Clinton had was they cut spending. Their percentage of spending to GDP was so much less, and that's what got out of it. That agreement in '97 cut taxes and cut spending, which spurred growth. And we need a pro-growth economy. That's how we're going to get out of this mess. What we're talking about today of just raising the taxes does not solve the problem. I don't see it passing the House. Now, Republicans have not sat back. We put revenue on the table, but the president has always said it has to be a balanced approach.
If you
2.5 to 3 times.
If you could choose, what's I mean, we've heard from their side, from the other side, and I'm talking about from your viewpoint. Yeah. Secretary Geithner has said if we don't get the 2%, if we don't get the rise in rates on the 2%, we'll go over the fiscal cliff. In your view, would it be better to go over the fiscal cliff than to get the back to the Clinton rates on the high end?
Look, I think the best thing, we don't go over the fiscal cliff.
You do,
over the fiscal cliff causes
you'd rather do some kind of deal.
Yes, that's why we proposed from right after the election. Everything we've heard from the other side has been silent until yesterday.
Well, what if he said no way unless we go to 39.6 on the top 2%? Would you vote no to that and go over the cliff?
Look, he's not. I'm not going to negotiate right here on the TV. I'd rather sit and negotiate with them. But the one thing I will tell you, what they're asking for is revenue. Republicans have put revenue on the table. The president's own words a year ago in 2011 said he could get 1.2 without raising any taxes. And think for a moment. If you close loopholes, you get a fairer process. For those who don't have lobbyists or high-priced attorneys or accountants, they get a very fair system. And no longer are we making an investment based upon what the IRS code is. It's based upon what the economics you think should be. So that is a fairer system for all Americans. It, to me, is more efficient. And that's a better place to go. It gets you what you're asking when you say taxes, because you're saying revenues from a standpoint in a more efficient manner. Most all economists agree. It does less destruction to the economy. But the most important thing for anybody to look at, we spend so much time on revenue, is what is the spending? Just like the first 2 months. Revenue's gone up 10% with us doing nothing, but spending has gone up 16%.
I will. One thing that I knew that 800 billion number. I knew that sounded familiar. I couldn't really quite place it, but so that's 10 years of raising the rates on the high end. Well, we spent that with one little stimulus plan, didn't we? Just boom. Wasn't that 800 billion? That's 10 years of the high end, and we spent that in the first year of his administration like it was. I mean, that was gone before. I mean, I wish we had that back. Then maybe we wouldn't need this 800 billion.
Exactly. And look at this. The president's proposal, you get 31 billion from the high end this year, but he proposes a $50 billion new stimulus package next year as well. He will spend more. He's asking for more taxes to spend more. That will get us in a worse situation. The best thing to do is end the uncertainty, do what Republicans said, we'd extend all the rates. There is more money sitting cash on hand than at any time in 50 years in America. If we ended uncertainty, we'd have the biggest stimulus with no money from government being borrowed.
Congressman, there are already people in your own party who are breaking regs, including Senator Bob Corker, who came out yesterday and said, let's just give in on this rates part so that we can really stick to our guns when it comes to making sure we are cutting spending. If you have to give on one to get the other, would you agree to that?
Yeah, but what I'm hearing Corker say, he's just going to give on one and hope for the other some other day. I think in a real negotiation, you get a standpoint where the president says he wants a balanced approach.
But would you give on one if you can get on the other today?
Well, Corker's not getting the others. I think you have to see.
No, but would you? If you could.
I would give this president revenue, not a tax increase, revenue. Just like we put on the table.
What if he needs $1 trillion, like we just heard from Erskine Bowles? He wants $1 trillion. You've put 800. So if you need to get there another way,
you don't know that until he would get in the room and negotiate. I'm more than willing to sit down and negotiate with him, but I'm going to find one that solves the problem to be able to rise above, just as you say. But I want to solve the problem. I don't want to be back here next year or 10 years from now getting the same questions. I think this country's better than that. Let's do what is right now. And let's not play political games. Let's not do this by polling, because that's what's got us in the place. Let's stick to our principles and solve the problem.
Yeah. And you're out in California, so you're ground zero from what can happen. Yeah.
Okay, look at California. I ask you this question. Should any American pay more than half of their income to government? So you go to 39%, right?
And add Obamacare.
Add Obamacare, then add 13.8 in California. And you're a small business running as an S corporation. Should you really pay higher than 50% of income into government? That's before any sales tax. That's before paying the cable tax to watch this show. That's before paying the water tax when you take the shower. Think about that. And people want to just give more and hope spending cuts will come some later day?
Congressman, we hear you. We appreciate it. And thanks for appearing this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll see you.
When we